It began on an ordinary autumn afternoon in the quiet town of Brookfield, where life rarely strayed from its steady rhythm. The streets were lined with maples whose leaves had just begun to scatter in shades of amber and red, swirling lazily in the crisp wind. The town's single high school was letting out for the day, and the familiar scene unfolded. Students spilling onto the sidewalk, backpacks slung over shoulders, chatter rising like a flock of birds. Among them was 16-year-old Ethan Cole, known to everyone not only for his bright smile but also for the black wheelchair that carried him wherever he went. Ethan had lived with muscular dystrophy since childhood, a condition that had gradually weakened his muscles, but he refused to let it diminish his spirit. He wheeled himself down the ramp outside the school with practiced ease, maneuvering past clusters of students. Some waved. Others shouted his name across the lot. His circle of friends was smaller than most, but his presence was widely felt. Teachers described him as resilient. His mother often said he had a knack for lightening heavy rooms, and his sister, 2 years younger, confided to friends that Ethan never let her forget that she mattered. That Thursday afternoon, Ethan's routine seemed unchanged. He lingered a few minutes near the school's front gate, adjusting his earbuds, waiting for the crosswalk light to turn. A teacher on duty, Ms. Douglas, would later recall seeing him nod at her before wheeling himself toward Maple Avenue, the route he always took home. It was a straight line. 5 blocks, then a left turn by the old hardware store, and another 3 before reaching the small white house with the sloping porch where his family lived. He should have been home in 20 minutes, but he never arrived. First, nothing seemed amiss. His mother, Patricia, assumed he'd stopped by a friend's house. She worked part-time at the library and wasn't home yet when he usually rolled in. When she returned just after 5, she found the house quiet. Ethan's backpack wasn't by the door. His chair wasn't in its usual place by the coat stand. She tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual either. His phone battery was old, and it died often. Patricia shrugged it off, setting about preparing dinner. It wasn't until 7 o'clock, when his younger sister Lily asked if Ethan was upstairs gaming, that Patricia's stomach twisted. The house was still empty. The silence had a weight to it now. She called Ethan's best friend, Ryan, who said he hadn't seen him since they left school. Another friend, Mia, added that she thought she saw Ethan crossing Main Street earlier but couldn't be sure. By 8, Patricia was pacing the kitchen, dialing numbers, classmates, neighbors, relatives, anyone who might have seen her son. No one had. When her husband, Mark, returned from his shift at the plant, the panic became real. Mark drove Ethan's usual route, headlights sweeping along sidewalks and alleys, searching for any trace. He saw nothing. No dropped backpack, no overturned wheelchair, no son. By 9, they were on the phone with Brookfield police. Officer Jensen, who took the call, initially treated it as a possible runaway. Teenagers disappear for hours, sometimes for days, and often return on their own. But Patricia's trembling voice, her insistence that Ethan wasn't like other teenagers, gave him pause. "He can't just walk off," she pleaded. "He needs his chair." By 10 that night, a small search party had gathered. Neighbors joined officers combing the streets. Flashlights cut across hedges and backyards. Volunteers peeked into garages and sheds. The hum of worry spread quickly. This wasn't just any missing teen. Ethan's disability made him vulnerable in ways others weren't. At the end of Maple Avenue, an officer noticed something peculiar. Faint tread marks along the curb, angled oddly toward a vacant lot. They resembled the narrow grooves left by a wheelchair. The grass in the lot was trampled, but no chair was found. Beyond the lot stretched a patch of woods leading to the river. The search pushed deeper into the darkness, but the only discovery that night was Ethan's phone, lying face down in the dirt near the lot's edge. The screen was cracked, the case scuffed. There were no fingerprints obvious to the eye, no sign of a struggle, and no trace of the boy who should have been home hours ago. News traveled fast. By morning, the disappearance of a wheelchair-bound teenager was headline material across the county. Local stations sent reporters to Brookfield High, where students hugged each other in clusters, whispering about theories and fears. Teachers tried to maintain calm, but anxiety seeped into classrooms. Detectives from the county sheriff's office arrived to assist. They canvassed Ethan's classmates, piecing together his last known movements. Ryan confirmed they'd left school together but split paths after the first intersection. Mia's uncertain sighting on Main Street became a focal point, though no businesses nearby had cameras pointed directly at the crosswalk. One grainy feed from a laundromat showed a blurry silhouette that could have been Ethan wheeling himself across, but the timestamp was inconclusive. The wheelchair remained missing, a chilling detail that troubled investigators. If Ethan had been taken, his abductor would have had to bring the chair too. Carrying him without it would have been nearly impossible. But why would someone take both? Speculation erupted. Some whispered about older kids known to bully Ethan in middle school. Others suggested a stranger passing through town, seizing an opportunity. But those closest to Ethan rejected the idea that he'd run away. He was inseparable from his family, his routines, his community. His medical needs alone made voluntary disappearance unlikely. As days stretched into a week, the town transformed. Flyers with Ethan's smiling face appeared on telephone poles and grocery store windows. A candlelight vigil illuminated the steps of Brookfield High. Search teams with dogs swept through the woods by the river, sniffing for traces. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning thickets too dense for volunteers. Nothing surfaced. Patricia and Mark held daily press briefings, their grief visible in trembling voices. Patricia often clutched Ethan's baseball cap, the one he wore backward despite her protests. Mark stood rigid beside her, his jaw tight, a man fighting to remain strong. Detectives uncovered little. Ethan's online activity showed no secret plans, no messages hinting at escape. His last texts, sent minutes before he vanished, were to Ryan about meeting up to play video games that evening. There was no farewell, no sign of distress. Then came a sliver of hope or dread, depending on interpretation. 10 days after his disappearance, a hiker reported seeing something near the riverbank, a wheel. Searchers rushed to the site, where they uncovered a single detached wheel from a wheelchair half buried in mud. It matched the make and model of Ethan's chair, but the rest of the chair was gone. And so was Ethan. The discovery reframed the case. Investigators theorized the chair might have been disassembled or broken during a struggle. But if so, where was the rest? The river was dragged, yielding debris but no answers. Rumors spread faster than facts. Stories of vans seen idling near Maple Avenue, of strangers asking questions at gas stations. None substantiated. For Patricia, every day without answers was agony. She clung to hope that her son was alive, that someone had taken him for reasons yet unclear. Lily, meanwhile, refused to sleep in her room. She curled on the couch with Ethan's blanket, whispering to friends that she sometimes dreamed she could hear his voice calling her name. Brookfield became a town divided by fear. Some believed Ethan had been targeted by an outsider. Others suspected someone closer, perhaps someone he trusted. But with no leads, no witnesses, and only a broken wheel as evidence, the case drifted toward silence. Yet silence has its own way of echoing. A month after Ethan's disappearance, investigators returned to the vacant lot where his phone had been found. Under layers of fallen leaves, they discovered something overlooked: a small fabric pouch containing Ethan's inhaler. It was dirt-stained but functional. Patricia confirmed it was his. This clue reignited the search. The pouch suggested he hadn't vanished willingly. He needed the inhaler for emergencies, and he never left home without it. Detectives expanded the search radius, interviewing truckers, travelers, and even known offenders in nearby counties. Still no Ethan. The absence grew heavier than presence. Brookfield, once lively with small-town charm, seemed subdued. Parents tightened curfews. Teenagers whispered about dangers lurking in shadows. The hardware store by Ethan's route saw dwindling customers. People said they couldn't walk past without feeling haunted. Through it all, Patricia refused to give up. Each morning she stood by the porch, scanning the street as though expecting Ethan to wheel up with his familiar grin. Mark threw himself into distributing flyers statewide, driving hours each weekend. Lily drew pictures of her brother in school notebooks, always with his cap and his chair, as if sketching him back into existence. By the second month, the case had gained national attention. News anchors debated theories. Advocacy groups for the disabled called for broader awareness of vulnerabilities faced by individuals like Ethan. His story became a symbol, a chilling reminder that safety was fragile. But for the Cole family, symbolism meant nothing without answers. They needed Ethan home, and until they found him, the question of what really happened on that autumn afternoon remained an open wound, one that time refused to close. The third week after Ethan's disappearance brought with it a strange stillness. The frenzied first days of search parties, helicopters, and reporters gave way to something quieter, heavier. Brookfield moved in rhythms of unease. Parents walking their children to school instead of letting them ride the bus. Shopkeepers locking doors earlier. Conversations in hushed tones at the diner about where Ethan could be. Detectives had combed the immediate area so thoroughly that even the fallen leaves seemed to whisper of overexposure. Every corner of the vacant lot had been measured and photographed. The woods were mapped with fluorescent tape still dangling from branches. And yet, beyond the wheel and inhaler pouch, no evidence placed Ethan anywhere but on that familiar route home from school. It was as if the boy had rolled off the edge of the map. To sustain momentum, investigators broadened their approach. They began conducting knock-and-talks, going door to door within a mile radius, asking residents to recall anything unusual. Most shook their heads, repeating they hadn't noticed a thing. But one elderly woman, Mrs. Conway, who lived 2 blocks from the hardware store, claimed she remembered hearing what sounded like a scuffle near the lot that evening. She couldn't say for certain, it might have been kids roughhousing, but the timing lodged in detectives' minds. Then came another lead equally fragile. A delivery driver reported seeing a white van parked irregularly near Maple Avenue around the time Ethan disappeared. The description was vague. No license plate number, no identifying decals, just a white van. In a small town, dozens of vehicles matched that description. Investigators checked as many as they could, questioning owners. All claimed to have alibis, though some were thin. Nothing stuck. Meanwhile, Ethan's family grappled with the emotional fallout. Patricia grew thinner, her face hollowing under sleepless nights. She clung to interviews with local reporters, insisting that her son was alive, that someone out there knew something. Mark withdrew into action, plastering flyers, updating a social media page dedicated to Ethan, speaking with advocacy groups. Lily, quieter than both, developed rituals, lighting a candle each night, leaving her brother's favorite snack on the kitchen counter, in case he comes home hungry. At school, Ethan's absence was palpable. His empty spot in class was a constant reminder. Teachers tried to soften the blow by encouraging projects that honored him. Essays about resilience, art displays of hope. But the hallways echoed differently now. The missing boy who couldn't walk but never let it stop him had become both inspiration and ghost. It was during this lull that detectives revisited Ethan's digital life. They combed through his gaming accounts, his social media, his emails. One thread caught their attention. A series of messages exchanged on a gaming forum with an anonymous user named Shadowrunner. The conversation seemed casual, discussing strategy, sharing memes, but detectives noticed the stranger repeatedly steering conversations toward personal details. "What's your neighborhood like?" One message read. "Do you roll home alone or with friends?" Ethan's replies were cautious but not dismissive. He mentioned his school and occasionally referenced his wheelchair. Could Shadowrunner have been grooming him? The account was traced, but the IP address bounced through proxies, leading investigators in circles. Cybercrime experts were called, but progress was slow. Just when the investigation threatened to stall, a startling discovery came from a fisherman along the river. While untangling his line from driftwood, he pulled up a scrap of fabric. It was navy blue, damp and frayed at the edges. Patricia identified it instantly as belonging to Ethan's hoodie, the one he had worn the day he vanished. The hoodie scrap reignited media attention. Reporters swarmed Brookfield once more, cameras flashing at the riverbank. Speculation surged. Had Ethan fallen into the water? Had someone dumped evidence there? Divers swept the river again, finding nothing conclusive. The fragment raised more questions than it answered. Theories multiplied. Some insisted the boy had been abducted by someone who knew his vulnerability. Others leaned toward a tragic accident near the river, though the missing wheelchair complicated matters. A few whispered darker ideas, that someone close to Ethan knew more than they let on. Patricia bristled at suggestions her son had drowned. Ethan wouldn't go near the river without help, she told a reporter firmly. And if he did, where's his chair? Where's the rest of him? Weeks turned to months. Winter crept over Brookfield, snow blanketing the lot where Ethan's phone was found, erasing even the faintest tire grooves. Christmas lights twinkled on porches, but in the Cole household, the decorations remained boxed. The family couldn't bear to celebrate without him. Instead, they placed a single candle in the window, burning night after night. Then, in January, a chilling event shook the fragile calm. A jogger on the outskirts of town stumbled upon a small backpack buried beneath brush along a trail. Inside were school notebooks, a half-empty water bottle, and Ethan's student ID. The bag was muddy but intact. Patricia collapsed when she saw it, clutching the worn notebooks with trembling hands. For investigators, the backpack complicated the timeline. The trail where it was found lay in the opposite direction of the river, away from Ethan's route home. Had someone planted it there? Or had Ethan been moved? The trail was scoured, yielding no further evidence. But the discovery rattled Brookfield. Parents now feared not just for their missing neighbor but for their own children. If someone had taken Ethan, they remained at large, possibly watching, waiting. Theories took root in every corner of town. In the diner, old men debated whether Ethan had been targeted for ransom. In church pews, whispers spread of a predator lurking in their midst. Online forums dissected every shred of evidence, some accusing the police of incompetence, others spinning elaborate conspiracies. Through it all, Patricia's message never wavered. Ethan is alive. We will bring him home. She appeared on national talk shows, her voice shaking but resolute. Advocacy groups amplified her plea, urging stronger protections for disabled youth. Her words resonated, but each night, the candle still burned alone in the Cole window. By spring, Ethan's case had grown cold to some, but not to those closest to him. Detectives cycled through tips, many leading nowhere. Still, a handful of haunting details kept them awake. The missing wheelchair, the fabric scrap by the river, the backpack on the trail. 3 pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. It was during this uncertain time that another thread emerged, one that shifted the case into darker territory. A retired truck driver named Harold came forward, claiming he remembered something odd the day Ethan vanished. He had been driving along a rural backroad not far from Brookfield when he saw a white van pulled over, its back doors open. Inside, he thought he glimpsed what looked like a wheelchair. At the time, he hadn't connected it to anything sinister. But when the news broke about the van sightings, the memory haunted him. Investigators took Harold seriously. They pressed for details, license plate, markings, driver description, but his recollection was hazy. Still, the possibility that Ethan had been loaded into a van on a lonely road chilled everyone. The lead was circulated across states, checking for vans linked to crimes, but again the trail went cold. For Patricia, each new development was a knife's twist, hope and despair in equal measure. She began carrying Ethan's inhaler pouch in her handbag, fingering it during interviews like a talisman. Mark, more stoic, grew frustrated with the lack of progress. He once snapped at a detective during a briefing, his voice breaking. "You have a phone, a wheel, a hoodie, and a backpack. How do you not have my son?" Lily absorbed her parents' grief quietly. She spent afternoons sketching Ethan from memory, drawing him not as missing but as present, smiling, cap tilted, chair beneath him. She showed one drawing to her mother, whispering, "This way he's still here." Brookfield, too, changed in subtle ways. The vacant lot became a site of uneasy ritual. Flowers placed at its edge, candles flickering on anniversaries of his disappearance. The trail where the backpack was found became infamous, avoided by joggers and children. The riverbank, once a favorite fishing spot, felt cursed. And yet, despite the weight of sorrow, the community refused to forget. Posters faded but were replaced. Candlelight vigils drew crowds year after year. Ethan's name became synonymous with both hope and loss, echoing in church prayers, in town meetings, in the quiet corners of every home. By the end of the first year, official leads had dwindled. Detectives rotated off the case. The white van remained a phantom. The digital breadcrumb of Shadowrunner evaporated into the ether. The wheel, the pouch, the fabric, the backpack. Each stood as monument to a boy who had vanished with his chair and left his town in permanent shadow. But disappearance is not the same as closure. For Patricia, Mark, and Lily, life continued on, forever fractured. For Brookfield, Ethan's absence became a silent presence, a ghost woven into the fabric of every street. And for investigators, the mystery lingered, gnawing like an unanswered question that time alone could never erase. As the second year of Ethan's disappearance crept in, Brookfield learned how grief lingers, not as a constant storm, but as a low, unending hum. The posters had grown weathered, their corners curling on lampposts and shop windows, yet Patricia insisted on replacing them every few months. She carried fresh stacks in her car, tape in her pocket. Mark sometimes accompanied her, though more often he drove long distances, spreading Ethan's face into counties where strangers didn't even know the name Brookfield. For investigators, the case hovered in limbo, not closed, but dormant. Leads were sparse. Detectives checked prisons for new inmates who matched the shadow of suspicion. They scanned databases for abandoned wheelchairs, any unusual medical supply purchases. Nothing. What kept the case alive were the fragments of evidence, each resurfacing in detectives' minds like echoes. The phone at the vacant lot, the inhaler pouch, the wheel at the river, the scrap of hoodie fabric, the backpack on the trail. None connected neatly, yet none could be dismissed. Each hinted at a trail of movement. Yet that trail broke, doubled back, scattered into contradictions. By now, theories had calcified into two camps. The first believed Ethan had been abducted, taken quickly and efficiently with the chair by someone who knew how to cover their tracks. The second believed something tragic had happened, an accident maybe near the river, and that evidence was scattered by currents, scavengers, or time. Patricia refused to entertain the latter. "My son didn't vanish into thin air," she repeated. "Someone has him." Then, in the spring, a new development shocked the community. During routine maintenance at an abandoned storage facility 15 miles outside town, a worker discovered an old duffel bag shoved behind a stack of crates. Inside was a collection of random items, broken tools, dirty rags, and, most chilling of all, a small lap blanket with Ethan's initials stitched in one corner. The blanket had been handmade by his grandmother years before. Patricia confirmed it instantly. "He used it in his chair every winter," she whispered. Investigators rushed to the storage unit, examining every inch. The unit had been leased under a fake name, payments made in cash. The security cameras had been broken for years. Dust coated the floor, and aside from the bag, nothing linked to Ethan directly. But the discovery reignited the case. Detectives mapped the location of the unit in relation to the other evidence sites. The lot, the river, the trail, now this. It painted a strange geography, circling Brookfield, branching outward like scattered breadcrumbs. But breadcrumbs leading where? Theories proliferated again. Some argued the storage unit suggested premeditation, that someone had held Ethan there briefly. Others thought the blanket had been planted, a cruel trick to stir false hope. Patricia clung to the idea it meant Ethan was alive, that someone had kept him safe or captive all this time. Meanwhile, whispers about the mysterious online figure, Shadowrunner, resurfaced. Journalists investigating Ethan's case claimed the username had popped up in forums again after months of silence. The posts were cryptic. References to rivers, to wheels, to unfinished journeys. None directly mentioned Ethan, but the timing was eerie. Detectives tried tracing the IP again, but the trail slipped through proxies like water through fingers. Brookfield, already strained by 2 years of fear, began to fracture. Some residents grew weary of the constant shadow of the case. Businesses struggled as outsiders associated the town with tragedy. A few even voiced resentment, quietly, never in front of Patricia, that resources were still being poured into a mystery unlikely to be solved. But others doubled down, insisting the town had a duty not to forget. Each anniversary of Ethan's disappearance was marked by a vigil at the school gymnasium. Hundreds gathered with candles, voices trembling through Amazing Grace. Photos of Ethan in his cap and hoodie filled screens, his smile frozen in time. Lily, now in high school herself, gave small speeches at these events, her voice steadier than her mother's. "My brother is more than a mystery," she told the crowd. "He is someone we love, someone we will not stop looking for." In private, though, Lily wrestled with darker feelings. She admitted to a close friend that sometimes she envied classmates whose siblings annoyed them, argued with them, slammed doors in their faces. She missed that ordinary chaos. Instead, her house was filled with silence and the constant hum of grief. "It's like living in a museum," she said once. "Everything frozen, waiting for him to come back." By the summer of the second year, investigators attempted a new tactic, re-examining the evidence with fresh eyes. Forensic technology had advanced. The scrap of hoodie fabric was retested, revealing faint traces of blood. The quantity was too small to determine much, but it confirmed what many had feared: Ethan had likely been injured. The wheel from the river was also reanalyzed. Soil samples stuck in its grooves suggested it had rolled through clay-rich terrain not typical of Brookfield's immediate area, hinting it may have been transported. These findings unsettled Patricia, but she latched onto them as proof that Ethan had fought, that he hadn't gone quietly. "If he bled," she told reporters, "it means he resisted. My boy resisted." Mark, ever more silent, began spending evenings driving routes in widening circles, as though he might stumble upon a clue the police had missed. He rarely spoke of these trips, but Lily sometimes heard the garage door creak open past midnight. Then, a chilling note appeared. Literally. One morning, Patricia found an envelope wedged in the family's mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed words. "Stop looking. He's gone." The paper had no fingerprints. The ink was generic. Investigators traced the printer type to thousands of possible models. Some thought it was a cruel prank. Others feared it was genuine, a taunt from whoever had taken Ethan. The note rattled Patricia deeply. For the first time, her conviction wavered. She broke down during a televised plea, sobbing that she couldn't endure another year of silence. Mark, gripping her hand, said nothing. Lily sat stiff beside them, eyes red but dry. Brookfield erupted with theories once more. Some claimed the note was proof Ethan's abductor still lingered near. Others dismissed it as a sick joke by someone craving attention. But regardless, it reopened wounds, drawing national cameras back to the town, back to the Coles' doorstep. As the second anniversary passed, something shifted in the case. Detectives, pressed by both the family and media, decided to revisit every piece of physical evidence, searching for overlooked connections. This time, they focused on the backpack. Mud caked on its zippers had been preserved but never fully analyzed. Under new testing, microscopic plant fragments were identified, plants that grew not along Brookfield's trail systems but in marshland 20 miles away. The revelation suggested the backpack had been relocated, deliberately planted where it was eventually found. If so, the entire timeline shifted. Ethan, or at least his belongings, had been moved repeatedly. This discovery breathed both hope and dread into Patricia's heart. Hope, because it meant someone had interacted with her son's things long after his disappearance. Dread, because it suggested orchestration, a predator methodically scattering evidence to mislead. The marshland was searched thoroughly. Cadaver dogs alerted twice, but nothing concrete was recovered. Still, investigators marked the area as critical, vowing to keep digging. For Brookfield, the case had by now become legend, whispered to newcomers as both cautionary tale and unsolved riddle. Children grew up knowing Ethan's name before they knew the town's history. Parents invoked his story to warn their kids against straying too far. The vacant lot, the river, the trail, all were marked not just on maps but in memory, etched into the town's collective identity. And through it all, the Cole family endured. Patricia carried her son's blanket to vigils. Mark kept his cap on the dashboard of his car. Lily, taller now, carried Ethan's spirit in her words, in speeches, in the quiet conviction that even if he never returned, he would never be erased. The wheel, the hoodie scrap, the backpack, the blanket, the note, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to resolve. Each clue deepened the mystery, turning Ethan's absence into something more than a disappearance. It was a presence, a shadow woven into every life in Brookfield. And still, the question persisted. What happened to Ethan Cole on that autumn afternoon when he wheeled away from school and never returned? Year 3 of Ethan Cole's disappearance began not with answers, but with more questions that refused to fade. The candle still burned in the Cole family's front window each night, a beacon of hope that had become as much a part of Brookfield's landscape as the church steeple or the diner sign. To newcomers, it was just a light. To those who knew, it was a wound that would not close. By now, the disappearance was no longer just a family's tragedy. It was a town's burden, a national headline that flared up each anniversary, and a ghost story parents used to caution their children. Stay close. Remember what happened to Ethan, they would say. The boy in the wheelchair who vanished had become a symbol, both of loss and of vulnerability. But symbols do not ease grief. Patricia carried Ethan's inhaler pouch everywhere, rubbing its worn edges like prayer beads. She had grown thinner still, her hair streaked with gray that hadn't been there 3 years earlier. Mark, more stoic than ever, seemed carved from stone. He still drove the county roads, still tacked fresh posters to gas stations and truck stops, but his words had dwindled to near silence. Lily, now a teenager, was the voice of the family. She spoke at vigils with a strength that surprised many. "My brother is not gone," she said into microphones, her voice steady. "He is missing. There's a difference." Investigators, too, continued their slow grind. Advances in forensic analysis gave them reason to revisit old evidence again. The blood on Ethan's hoodie scrap was tested with newer technology, confirming it was his. Trace elements suggested he had been outdoors when injured. The wheel grooves, examined under better equipment, revealed faint impressions of gravel consistent with certain rural driveways. Detectives compiled a list of properties in the region with that gravel type, but it spanned hundreds of addresses. False leads plagued them. A tip from a drifter claimed Ethan had been spotted in another state, alive and well, rolling down a street. Investigators pursued it, only to find it was a case of mistaken identity. Another caller insisted the Cole family themselves were hiding something, that Ethan had never left home, spinning conspiracy theories that hurt Patricia deeply. Detectives investigated anyway, clearing the family, but damage was done. Rumors spread faster than corrections. Brookfield itself bore scars. The vacant lot where Ethan's phone was found was now fenced off, its weeds taller each year, its soil heavy with whispers. The riverbank where the wheel was recovered became a place of dread, avoided by fishermen who once loved it. The trail where the backpack was discovered grew over, but no one jogged there anymore. Even the abandoned storage facility that had yielded Ethan's blanket was torn down, as if erasing it might erase the memory. Didn't. For the Cole family, life split into before and after. Before, they were ordinary. Dinners together, Ethan's laughter filling the house, Lily's teasing, Patricia's library stories, Mark's steady presence. After, every day was defined by absence, by a chair that sat empty in the corner, by a silence too loud to bear. It was during this heavy period that another twist came, jolting the investigation. A hunter, trekking through marshland 25 miles from Brookfield, stumbled upon something rusted and half-buried in mud. It was the frame of a wheelchair, corroded, missing its wheels, but unmistakable in its shape. Investigators transported it carefully, comparing it to Ethan's model. Though time and damage had erased serial numbers, experts confirmed it matched. Patricia wept when she saw it. "That's his," she whispered. "That's my son's chair." The discovery reignited national interest. News vans descended on Brookfield again, satellite dishes sprouting like weeds. The marsh was combed, divers plunging into murky waters, dogs sniffing through reeds. But nothing else was found, no clothing, no remains, no further clues. Just the chair, rusted and broken, as if discarded deliberately. This find deepened the sense of orchestration. The wheel at the river, the scrap of hoodie, the backpack on a trail, the blanket in storage, and now the chair in a marsh. All scattered across miles, like breadcrumbs tossed by an unseen hand. Detectives theorized the perpetrator wanted to taunt, to prolong suffering, to scatter enough evidence to keep the mystery alive but unsolved. The FBI became involved, lending profilers who suggested the abductor might be local, someone with knowledge of the town's geography, someone who derived control from spreading fear. The online figure Shadowrunner remained a suspect, though nothing linked him definitively. Patricia clung to the possibility Ethan was alive, despite the chair's grim symbolism. "Maybe they gave him another," she argued. "Maybe he's out there, waiting." Mark said nothing, his silence a wall even Lily could not scale. The community fractured further. Some rallied tighter, demanding justice, forming neighborhood watches. Others retreated, tired of fear, eager to move on. But the case refused to fade. Each new clue was oxygen, reigniting the fire of uncertainty. Then came another cruel twist. In the middle of summer, a second note arrived in the coal mailbox. This one was handwritten, scrawled in jagged letters. "Stop digging." The chair was the last piece. Panic spread. Police increased surveillance around the Cole home, fearing the family was being watched. But cameras caught nothing unusual. The note, like the first, was untraceable. Some investigators argued it was another hoax, exploiting the family's pain. Others believed it was authentic, a message from the same hand scattering evidence. Patricia grew paranoid, convinced someone was stalking them. She reported hearing footsteps outside at night, shadows moving across windows. Mark checked the yard repeatedly, finding nothing. Lily, though frightened, refused to let fear silence her. She gave another speech at the next vigil, her voice fiery. "To whoever did this, you do not get to erase him. You do not get to win." By the fourth year, Ethan's disappearance was no longer fresh in headlines, but it remained alive in hearts. Podcasts featured his story, true crime shows dissected the evidence, online sleuths argued endlessly in forums. Each theory was more elaborate than the last. A serial predator, a local conspiracy, even rumors of human trafficking rings. None could be proven. In Brookfield, Ethan's absence became part of the town's identity. Murals of him appeared on walls. School assemblies honored his name. Even as years passed, his story refused to let go. But for the Coles, there was no moving on. Patricia's health faltered under stress, migraines plaguing her. Mark grew more reclusive, often found sitting in Ethan's empty room late at night. Lily, nearly grown now, carried the weight of two roles, daughter and surrogate hope-bearer. She applied to colleges with majors in criminology, quietly telling friends she wanted to solve cases like her brothers. Then, 5 years after Ethan's disappearance, an unexpected revelation emerged. During a federal sweep of online predators, authorities uncovered a server containing chat logs under the name Shadowrunner. Among thousands of messages were fragments unmistakably linked to Ethan, references to his wheelchair, to his school, even to the river. But the server was international, bouncing through multiple countries, its owner hidden behind layers of anonymity. It confirmed what many feared. Ethan had been targeted deliberately, but by whom and why remained locked behind digital walls. For Patricia, it was proof her son had not simply vanished into thin air. "Someone reached out to him," she said. "Someone reeled him in." But for detectives, it was another dead end. Evidence without identity. A voice without a face. Still, the case refused to die. Every anniversary brought renewed coverage. Every vigil drew crowds. Every new clue kept the wound raw. The wheelchair in the marsh, the notes, the Shadowrunner logs. All pointed to orchestration, to cruelty designed to prolong agony. And yet, even after years, the central question remained unanswered. Where was Ethan? Brookfield no longer expected resolution. But Patricia, Mark, and Lily refused surrender. Their lives had been reshaped by absence, but their love for Ethan remained as present as the candle in the window. The boy in the wheelchair who vanished had become more than a mystery. He was a presence, a force that haunted, that demanded remembrance. And until answers came, the story of Ethan Cole remained unfinished. A puzzle scattered across years and miles, daring anyone to solve it. 6 years had passed since Ethan Cole vanished on his way home from school, and time had not dulled the mystery. It had sharpened it into something sharper, crueler. Each year without answers deepened the wound. The candle in the Cole family window was now replaced each season, Patricia carefully buying new ones before the old burned down. It had become ritual. Trim the wick, strike the match, whisper a prayer. For outsiders, Ethan's case was one of many in the true crime landscape. A puzzle picked apart in podcasts, dissected in online forums, featured in hour-long television specials. For Brookfield, it was daily life. The town's name was no longer its own. It was fused with Ethan's. Detectives assigned to the case rotated frequently, each bringing fresh eyes, each leaving without resolution. One, Detective Alvarez, grew obsessed. She poured through every piece of evidence again and again. The phone, the pouch, the wheel, the hoodie scrap, the backpack, the blanket, the rusted chair, the notes. She plastered her office walls with maps and timelines, red strings stretching between clues like veins. Colleagues whispered that the case was eating her alive, but Alvarez refused to back down. "It's solvable," she muttered again and again. "Every puzzle has a key." False leads plagued her. A man arrested in another state confessed briefly to abducting Ethan, only to retract his statement when investigators proved he was elsewhere. Another tip claimed Ethan was being held in an isolated farmhouse. The raid revealed nothing but empty rooms and a family of bewildered strangers. Each false lead dragged Patricia through another cycle of hope and heartbreak, leaving her weaker than before. Rumors spread, too. Some whispered Ethan had been taken into human trafficking, sold far from Brookfield. Others muttered about ritualistic cults in the marshlands, weaving his disappearance into local folklore. Children dared each other to visit the vacant lot at night, claiming to hear the squeak of wheels in the dark. Brookfield lived in a constant state of superstition, fear, and speculation. Patricia despised the rumors, but she could not silence them. "He's not a ghost story," she said once during a vigil, her voice cracking. "He's my son." Lily, now preparing for college, had become both daughter and advocate. She took over the family's social media page about Ethan, posting updates, sharing memories, keeping his name alive in the digital world. Her posts were raw, vulnerable. "It's been 2,212 days since I last saw my brother. I still expect him to roll into my room and tell me I'm hogging the Wi-Fi." Thousands shared her words, offering sympathy, but sympathy could not bring Ethan home. Then came a revelation that startled even the weary investigators. A construction crew clearing land near the old rail yard, 12 miles from Brookfield, uncovered a shallow pit containing objects wrapped in tarp. Inside were fragments of metal, resembling parts of a dismantled wheelchair. Nearby lay a set of gloves stiff with age, and a notebook too waterlogged to decipher. The fragments matched Ethan's model again, though the condition made it impossible to say if they belonged to his specific chair or another like it. But the location deepened the puzzle. Why were pieces of a chair found in a marsh, and more near a rail yard miles away? Was someone scattering duplicates? Or was Ethan's chair disassembled and spread deliberately to create confusion? Theories shifted. Some investigators believed Ethan had been transported along these routes, evidence discarded at intervals. Others feared the items were plants, staged to mislead. Detective Alvarez grew more convinced someone was orchestrating the case like a grim performance. "This isn't random," she told colleagues. "It's deliberate. It's controlled." The FBI profiler agreed. Whoever was responsible likely followed the family's pain. Watching media coverage, feeding it just enough to keep the wound open. The notes in the mailbox supported this theory. Taunts, reminders, proof that someone was near enough to touch their lives. But near was not the same as known. The trail remained shrouded. Mark Cole, once stoic, grew more withdrawn. He no longer spoke at vigils. Instead, he sat silently beside Patricia, his hand on hers, his eyes fixed on the candlelight. He still drove back roads, though fewer now, his health fraying from years of strain. Patricia's once firm voice cracked easily. Lily, in contrast, had grown stronger, her speeches sharper, her resolve firmer. "If you're watching this," she said into cameras during one anniversary broadcast, "know this, we are not stopping. You've stolen him from us, but you will not steal our voices." Brookfield held onto those words. The town, though tired, continued to rally. Churches rang bells each anniversary. Schools held assemblies. Local businesses kept Ethan's flyer in their windows. The case was no longer just unsolved, it was part of who they were. Then, 7 years in, another haunting twist. A letter arrived at the Brookfield police station, postmarked from a neighboring state. The handwriting was the same jagged scrawl as the second note delivered to the Cole home. It contained a single sentence. "You've searched the river, but not the caves." Detectives froze. Caves? Brookfield's geography included old limestone quarries, abandoned decades ago, their entrances hidden by overgrowth. Some were rumored to stretch deep underground, known only to locals who explored them as kids. Search teams were mobilized, combing through quarry maps, organizing specialized crews. The caves were dangerous, unstable ceilings, sudden drops, flooded passages. But investigators pressed in, dogs leading the way, flashlights cutting through pitch black. For days, crews searched. They found traces of animal remains, graffiti, old beer cans, but nothing tied directly to Ethan. Still, the caves haunted everyone. The thought of a boy in a wheelchair dragged into such a place was unbearable. Patricia nearly collapsed when she heard. "Not underground," she sobbed. "Please, not underground." The search yielded no answers, but it deepened the torment. Whoever sent the letter knew the caves existed. They wanted investigators to picture Ethan there, to suffer the image. Detective Alvarez pinned the note to her board, lines of red string stretching toward it. "He's playing with us," she muttered. "He's dictating the story." The story indeed felt dictated, like chapters unfolding under an unseen hand. First the wheel, then the pouch, then the hoodie scrap, then the backpack, then the blanket, then the chair, now the notes, the caves. Each piece delivered just when the case began to cool. Each cruelly timed to reignite pain. And always the absence of the one thing that mattered, Ethan himself. The Cole family survived, though survival hardly felt like living. Patricia now wore Ethan's cap daily. Its brim frayed, its scent faded. Mark rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were simple. "We keep looking." Lily, nearly grown, carried the family's voice into the future, determined to fight until answers came. But answers did not come. Not yet. Only more questions, more shadows, more reminders that the story was far from finished. Brookfield itself seemed suspended between past and present, unable to move forward while Ethan remained missing. The candle in the window burned still. The vigils continued, and the boy in the wheelchair who vanished remained both presence and absence, a ghost etched into every street, every whispered rumor, every unanswered prayer. And as the 8th year loomed, one truth hardened. Ethan Cole's story was no longer just about one boy. It was about a town trapped in a riddle, a family chained to hope, and a shadow that refused to let go. The 8th year of Ethan Cole's disappearance arrived quietly, without the media frenzy of earlier anniversaries. But the absence weighed no less heavily. Brookfield had changed. New families had moved in, old shops had closed, and children who once carried Ethan's flyers were now grown. Yet the candle still burned in the Cole family window, steady as a heartbeat. For Patricia and Mark, the years had carved lines into their faces. They no longer chased every tip with the same frantic urgency. Time had taught them to brace for false hope, but they still believed. Belief had become survival. Lily, now in college studying criminology, carried that belief into her lectures, into her research papers, into every word she spoke about the brother who vanished. She had promised herself she would never let his name fade. Detective Alvarez remained on the case, though her colleagues whispered she was obsessed. Her office walls were still crowded with photos, strings, timelines. Every clue, phone, will pouch, hoodie scrap, backpack, blanket, chair, notes, caves was there. To her, the case was not cold. It was alive, waiting to be unlocked. But time had given the case a cruel weight. Ethan was no longer the boy who had vanished last week, or last month, or last year. He was the boy who had vanished nearly a decade ago. That length of time turned possibility into improbability, hope into endurance. And still, the question remained, what had happened on that autumn afternoon? That spring, an unexpected discovery rattled the silence once more. A property developer clearing land for new housing stumbled upon a buried metal box, rusted and locked, beneath the roots of a fallen oak. Inside were items sealed in plastic. A set of photographs, a pocket knife, and a torn page from a notebook. The photographs were blurred, poorly lit, but investigators could make out what appeared to be a wheelchair in the background of one, half shrouded in shadow. The pocket knife had no obvious link to Ethan, but the notebook page carried scribbled words. He resists. He remembers. Forensic tests yielded little, no fingerprints, no DNA, no traceable ink. The box itself had been buried years earlier, the soil compacted above it. Yet the items reignited fear. If authentic, the page suggested Ethan had lived beyond his disappearance, resisting whoever held him. Patricia clung to this possibility with trembling hands. He's alive, she whispered through tears. He fought. He remembered. Mark, silent, pressed the page to his chest, eyes closed. Lily, older now, asked investigators bluntly. Then where is he? Who wrote this? Detectives could not answer. The photographs, enlarged and enhanced, revealed nothing definitive. The shadowy wheelchair could have been Ethan's or any chair. The words could have been truth or taunt. But once again the case stirred. Once again Brookfield braced. Theories reignited. Some claimed the buried box was proof Ethan had been kept alive for years. Others insisted it was another cruel game by the same hand scattering evidence across the county. Online sleuths spun elaborate timelines, piecing clues together like threads in a tapestry. But the picture never held. Each theory collapsed under scrutiny, leaving only fragments. For Detective Alvarez, the box was both torment and validation. He's still out there, she murmured in late-night briefings. Alive or not, he's still here. This isn't finished. But Patricia began to falter. The years had worn her spirit thin, and though she clung to hope, exhaustion gnawed at her. One night, she admitted to Lily, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever see him again. Sometimes I'm afraid the candle will burn longer than I will." Lily held her tightly, whispering, "I'll keep it lit, always." The community, too, bore the weight differently now. Vigils still drew crowds, but smaller than before. Life pressed on as it must. Yet Ethan's name lingered in whispers, in graffiti carved into bathroom stalls, in stories told to children. Brookfield could not escape him. He was stitched into its identity. Then, on the 9th anniversary, a final twist arrived. A letter, handwritten in the same jagged scrawl as before, appeared not in the coal mailbox but on the steps of Brookfield High School. It read, 9 years, still burning. You'll never find him. He's part of the town now. The words sent shivers through everyone who read them. Investigators analyzed the paper, the ink, the strokes. Again, nothing traceable. But the message was chilling. Whoever had orchestrated Ethan's disappearance was still watching, still feeding off the town's pain. For Patricia, it was both unbearable and affirming. "If they're still writing," she said, her voice trembling, "then Ethan mattered to them. He mattered enough to keep this alive. And if they keep it alive, then so will we." Mark, though nearly broken by years of silence, nodded. "We keep burning the candle," he said simply. "We keep his name alive." Lily, now taller, stronger. Her voice steady as steel, spoke at the vigil that year with words that etched themselves into every heart present. Ethan is not just a case. He is not just a story. He is my brother, and he is this town's son. Whoever thinks they can erase him is wrong. He lives in every one of us who refuses to forget. The crowd rose, candles flickering like stars, their light casting shadows across the gymnasium walls. The vigil ended in silence, but a silence filled with presence, with Ethan's absence that was not absence at all. And so the story of Ethan Cole remained unresolved. The boy in the wheelchair who vanished never returned, yet he was never gone. His name was whispered in classrooms, painted in murals, prayed over in church pews. His evidence lay scattered like breadcrumbs across years and miles. A phone, a pouch, a wheel, a scrap of fabric, a backpack, a blanket, a chair, notes, caves, a box, a letter. Each piece a reminder, each piece a wound, each piece a refusal of closure. The candle still burns in the Cole family window. Some nights, Patricia swears she sees its glow reflected in Ethan's smile. Some nights, Mark sits silently beside it, his hand on the table, waiting. Some nights, Lily lights it herself, whispering, "For you, Ethan, always for you." Brookfield, too, keeps its light, for in the end, Ethan Cole is not just the boy who vanished. He is the presence that endures, the question that will not die, the reminder that even in silence, some stories refuse to fade. And until the truth is known, until someone, somewhere, dares to speak, the town remains haunted, the family remains steadfast, and the flame in the window keeps burning against the dark.